Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net, doing a brand new Lost Media video. Now, the important thing about this Lost Media video that I can comment about is that this is something that I don't think a lot of people are aware ever existed. I think I'm breaking new ground on comments about the Lost Media itself. This is a lost video game specifically. Now, what makes a lost video game? There's a lot of talk about that for a couple of reasons. Now, with this new games as a service, dependent upon a central server thing going on, there are going to be a lot of games that are already non-functional or will become or guaranteed to become non-functional in the future. Technically, this is one of those games. In fact, I think this is one of the very first games as a service that was there. The only difference between this game and the current games as a service is that there was no 3D game engine. There was no controller or anything like that. This wasn't that kind of game. Even though you paid for it, very similar to how you would pay an MMO or Xbox Live, for example, you would simply just pay a monthly fee to play. And you didn't own the game outright. Even if you bought a box copy, which were released later, the game wasn't really on it. It was just a executable and access code. There was nothing else, basically. Not much to preserve. Well, we'll talk about what should be preserved, what could be preserved, and where the media itself actually might be. But we're going to talk about this later on. First off, this game was called Majestic. It was released in the year 2000. And the idea behind Majestic was that this was a game where all conspiracy theories were real. Everything that you could possibly believe was real. And you inadvertently, as a player of the game, becomes wrapped up in this whole new conspiracy involving a shadow government set up. I'll talk more about that later. And you essentially need to protect yourself and protect your allies that are either in-game associates or something else. So how did this game actually work? There were several different ways. When you signed up to play the game, it worked like an MMO. So obviously there was a sign-up sheet and everything. And you would provide your email address. You would provide your instant messenger AOL Instant Messenger account name. You'd provide your phone number and your fax number if you had one. And that was basically what you needed at minimum to play. I'm sorry, my microphone is falling out. But basically it worked like this. There were 5 episodes in a demo, so essentially 5.5 episodes. And the way that the game was set up is that each segment of the game would be set up with episodes themselves, or in the form of an episode, which could take in real time anywhere from 3 to 6 days per episode. In that, you played the story, or you at least followed the story from beginning to end. You solved the puzzles along the way until the story of the episode reached its logical conclusion, in which case then you'd either go to the next episode or you'd wait for the next episode to get posted. The story would get told through 3 different medias. One is you would have real-time conversations over instant messengers with scripted bots, basically, that were written down. The second option was you could have basically video messages sent to you by over real player, just one way. You could also get pre-recorded phone messages, emails, and faxes. That's basically what you would interact with. The faxes would have clues or information, and the videos that you watch would have clues and information, and basically all of this stuff would go on to assist you with, like, well, I need to tell somebody the right thing. I need to tell this the right thing. You know, who is this person that's assisting me right now? Can they be trusted? That sort of thing. And it was a linear experience for each individual player. Everybody that played got pretty much the exact same experience. Although, obviously, the people that they interacted with, the game would let you interact with other players. that were signed up at around the same time, and you could keep tabs with them as if you need to share tips and tricks and stuff. So it was interesting to determine who in your list was like um, a real player versus a bot. I kind of appreciated that at least. So, how did this happen? Well, there was a company that was part of EA that, again, decided they wanted to just tell a new type of story. And they were inspired by the movie The Game, starring Michael Douglas. And they wanted to tell a story involving at least or make a game that would be played in reality. This was essentially an alternate reality game, an ARG, one of the very first ARGs actually. The only difference between, and we still have these. There are still ARGs going on to this day and still being played to this day. The difference is that most ARGs are usually done in promotion of something, and they're free to play and free to participate in. This was not. This was, like I said, this was a paid ARG. And we're not going to get into this at the time because there were competing ARGs that were going on that were free. That may have been another reason as to why it didn't work out. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The plot line of the of the story that at least the beginning of the story was that as soon as the game launched, or basically as soon as you started playing the game, the system crashed. Espionage, attack, something along those lines. But now the game developers are basically, their company's been dissolved, they're on their own, and they need help to protect themselves from whoever it was that was trying to shut them down and stop them from seeking out the truth, basically. Now, at this time, this was, like I said, this was the year 2000. X-Files was a big deal. And so, and conspiracy theories were all over the place about things like Area 51 and who was Deep Throat and the JFK assassination and everything else. And to the game's credit, I originally signed up thinking that I was going to be, basically participating in this type of story about trying to solve all of these, conspiracy mysteries and stuff that really happened. The game didn't go there, which is kind of surprising because a lot of the material that they were talking about, you would think that it would go there. But the game didn't cover any real conspiracies. If they did, it was just to say, oh, I knew that person, or oh, I remember when this happened or something. But the stuff that was involved was not, at least not in the episodes that were released. These were new conspiracies, basically, that were made up specifically for the game. Particularly, this was a concept of a shadow government that was created by what happens if companies basically get a lot of money on their hands, conglomerate, and basically have so much money and resources and manpower that they can essentially function as their own government, basically, and who's going to tell them no. And that was basically the plot line of the story, is that you're dealing with a company that got a little bit too big for its britches and thinks they're in charge, and they're going to basically mow over whoever tries to stop them, including you. I know a lot of people would comment that as something else, but again, it was original. The companies that were involved were fictional. If there were websites or traces of the websites that are still around, I can assure you they were set up by the game developers and they are in fact fake. So again, and like I said, with the benefit of hindsight, it's been 20 years since the game came out. There were a couple of times when they touched upon certain events that did actually happen, and in the interim of the 20 years, we actually know the truth behind those events, and it turns out the game was wrong. Like, we now know who the identity of Deep Throat was, for example. We know his motivations behind it. We know that Deep Throat, or at least the real man behind Deep Throat, Mark Felt, we know who he is, we know his name, and we know he said what his motivations were, and he just wanted to do what he felt was right at the time. When the game talked about it, obviously he wasn't named in the game because, again, they didn't know who he was at the time. They just called him Deep Throat. One guy said, yeah, I knew the real Deep Throat. Please stop calling me that. He was a bitter man who did what he did out of spite. We know that's not true, but again, the game was going for what it knew at the time. I'm sure it took its understanding from watching All the President's Men. We get that. So, why is this lost? Actually, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's talk about the game a little bit more. So, again, starting with, the game is played in real time, although there are certain puzzles that will basically cause the game to stop or to hang up until you solve it. You will get phone calls, you will get video messages, you will get faxes, all in the pre-recorded times. So, but there are genuine stop points. Like if a player says, or if an NPC says, "I'm going to call you tomorrow," that's it. There's no more plot line for the game. That call isn't going to come up till tomorrow morning at the earliest. And that basically continued on. And then, once that call came, some of the other guys may be available to talk to or follow up about it, and then you could resume play. The funny thing is that one of the first games I ever downloaded on the Apple Watch is a game called Lifeline, and it actually worked on a timer kind of like that actually. And so I love, if you have an Apple Watch, get Lifeline. It's a great game, but yeah, it works on the same basic principle. It does have a follow-up game called Silent Night that's also available for the Apple Watch. I would recommend getting either of those if you're an Apple Watch user. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Basically, then you would follow the clues. Sometimes it might say, well, we need to know this guy's password, and I'm not going to tell you the password unless you can prove that you're him. So you'll have to answer these questions that can be easily discovered from just simple Google searches. Google wasn't around, or Yahoo searches. And you'd find the fake websites that we set up and stuff, and that was great. The game was very theatrical, actually. The game was heavily set up in a form where they tried very much to make the fourth wall not exist. The only other time I can think of where something like that actually happened was when the previous video I talked about Star Trek The Experience. If you had went on the Klingon encounter for Star Trek The Experience, that beaming up sequence made you think, oh wait, this is real. Star Trek is real. It was literally that good a sequence. This game, Majestic, actually pulled something very similar to that, in that very early on in the game, you're basically sitting through, you're watching the tutorial, and the tutorial actually crashes midway through. And you're thinking, oh no, what's going on here? And it turns out that that it's an in-game reason. It's like, no, somebody shut down the game developer. And the game is not going on anymore. The game's been stopped. And the game developers have all scattered to the wind, and you have to help them because they're still being sought after by nefarious people. The demo would take 3 days to finish in real time. If you had either a purchase for the subscription, then you would then go straight to episode 1. If you did not, then you'd have to pay, and then you would continue on. And then episode 1 would continue on from there, and that would take 6 days to complete. And most of the other episodes would go in that stretch. It would basically take about 6 days to complete an episode. 5 full episodes were released, not including the demo. The last episode, they actually got Joe Pantoliano, one of my favorite actors of all time, Joe Pantoliano. You would know him as Cypher from The Matrix, or the guy who screamed out, "You got the Duke!" during the movie Midnight Run with Robert De Niro. Great actor. I loved him in U.S. Marshals. That was the first movie I had really seen him in. I loved him in U.S. Marshals also. Of course, he was also in The Fugitive with Tommy Lee Jones. So yeah, that was great too. I thought he was a great actor. It was so awesome to see, because what they did was they did 2 things. Obviously, they had to do voice recordings of him so it would make it sound like he was giving you phone calls. Also, he was doing video presentations, obviously, because if you got Joey Pantoliano, then basically you're going to want to put him on camera. And so some video messages would actually come in from him. And finally, the way they tied it up was they actually had him fill out a document, and he actually wrote it in his own handwriting, actually. So when that document is faxed over to you, you literally have Joe Pantoliano's real handwriting filling out that form. But I'm getting, and it basically ends with Joe Pantoliano goes missing, and were the people that you were assisting this whole time responsible for it? That's basically the big cliffhanger of episode 5. And then the decision was that they were going to do a second season. That basically this was going to be the end of season 1. Obviously, at that point, all purchases stopped. Like all recurring billing basically stopped. And if there were huge lulls, they would also stop. So let's say, for example, I think there was like a big gap between like 1 or 2 of the episodes, not including between like 4 and 5. There was like a huge gap there. And so they just didn't charge people that month. So people just didn't get a charge that month. So they were fair when it came to that type of stuff. can't remember the exact fee for it, but it was about, I would say, probably no more than $15 a month, which was, again, that was MMO territory. Um, so yeah, basically that was basically where it ended, where how the game ended. It later, of course, came out that EA decided they were not going to move forward with future episodes. I think for like a blink and a second, I was working that summer, and I think they posted what was going to be the complete story, or what was going to end up becoming the complete story, on the official website, or just so people. I think I read part of it once. I skimmed through it, and I never had a chance to read it again. And of course, now the site is down. And as far as I can tell, there's no way back machine for it. I looked. I tried to see if it had ended up in the way back machine, but it didn't appear to be archived as far as I know. So that's also lost. Now, obviously, this is a game that, and of course, obviously, you couldn't replay. The game could only be played once. You could not reset the game as a new character or something like that, obviously. The experience would not reset. So you played once, if at all, and when it was over, it was over. The only thing, the video messages couldn't be saved. Those were all streamed through Real Player. Those couldn't be saved or archived. I'm sorry, phone calls obviously aren't going to be recorded unless you're recording your phone. Although you did have the opportunity to replay audio clips through the executable, but that only lasted for as long as the site lasted, or the web the account the program lasted. And obviously, anything that was faxed to you, obviously you could keep. But at the time, fax machine qualities were very poor, and they were pushing high resolution stuff. So I remember having a very poor quality fax machine at the time, and it would take forever to receive a fax because they were using very high bit images in color, and I'd see like gibberish, but at least be visually enough to see. But it would not be worth keeping. Like, you'd write down the information that you needed from the fax, and then you'd toss the page out. So those weren't saved either. So what happened to this media? Where is the lost media? All of it, basically. The only things that I've actually been able to find of it online were some of the press. I think there was like a 15-minute press junket video that ended up getting preserved online and is available on YouTube to watch. But it didn't have game footage or anything like that in it, at least not as far as I know. It was all about, the concepts behind it, what they were willing to do, what they were able to do. But of course, there were no story segments, no story spoilers in them. Now, for anybody that would want to save this, what would there be to save? There's a couple of things that actually could be saved. Obviously, the images that were sent out, the emails that were sent out, the scripts of the instant messenger conversations for everybody during the different sequences. I'm sure that was written down on like a notepad or something. All the video messages, and reproductions of the websites. Other than that, there's really nothing else that's needed to be saved. The software to save it was not important. It was just simply a simple login script that stored a couple of things, or at least allowed you to access certain things while the game was running. Who would have it? Where would it be? The only place I can think of where it would be EA's servers. That's it. EA's got it. If they still have it? Maybe they tossed it. I don't know. I know that they claimed like this was an independent company that was being published by EA, but the truth is that it was an EA company. They just basically branded a fictional name on it to make it seem like these are little guys. As far as I know, the game developers that appeared in the game were not the actual game developers. They were actors. The most of the videos were done on a pretty shoestring budget, so there was that too. It's all lost, and nobody remembers it. If anybody actually does, maybe somebody who worked on the game has anything, please point me to where it could be archived or saved. I'd love to be able to see what the ending was going to be. I do remember one thing though, I think in the finale document that was released, they did mention that the guy that we worked with that we thought kidnapped Joe Pants was innocent. He was being set up by it. So that was a big deal. But that was it. That's all I remember. And I remember I played this game over the course of several months. I was one of many who played it, but apparently not a lot of people remember it. The only real remembrance that it actually existed was a PC Gamer article from I think December 2000, a preview article, and maybe a PC Gamer review of when the box copy came out. And again, there was a box copy. It doesn't work. If you find a box PC game called Majestic, it won't function. It's just a it was just an all that's on there is going to be an executable and a couple of wallpapers. There's no actual game in there, and they did not include the the video footage was not included on there, which is a reason why most people avoided it, was because dial-up quality was very poor at the time. So a lot of the video streams were basically of the quality of slideshows, and people were hoping that they would have included the videos on the CDs, which they did not do. Those were all running off the central server in real player mode. So go figure. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will. I'm curious if you guys are interested in hearing more about it. We got one more video we're going to be talking about, one more lost media video, but this is actually something, this next lost media video that I'm going to be working on is for a movie. People are aware that it's lost. The only difference between some of the other videos that have talked about this lost media and that already is that I've seen it. I've seen this lost movie. I've actually watched it beginning to end. And so has my father. And I've met the director actually. So I'll talk about my experience with that next time. Until next time, my name is Maniac with GameXS.net. Take care. Over and out.